today what we're going to talk about is, we're in Parsha Vayishlach, but we're going to talk about, are the names Yaakov and Yisroel. And we're going to talk about what they mean, but we're also going to we're talking about what it has to do with us, because it continues. As we remember, Abraham had different children. He had Yitzchak, and then he also had Ishmael, and there were others later on. So there are a lot of descendants in the world, and Yitzchak had Yaakov and Esau, so he also has other descendants in the world. But Yaakov has only us. All of his children became the 12 tribes and more, and so we are all descendants of Yaakov. So everything we learn from our ancestors has to do with us. So we see that in Parshas Vayishlach, Yaakov returned to the land of his fathers after coming from Haran, where he built his family. And now he kind of ran away from Esau and went to make a family. But now he's concerned about meeting his brother Esau, who hated him, and some ways still does. So here we see a wrestling match between Yaakov and a mysterious man. This is one of the most interesting stories. And what does it mean? What happened? Yaakov was alone. And the Medrash tells us that he wrestled with a spiritual being that appeared human. Yaakov, who was a spiritual warrior, I have to talk about what that means, overcomes his adversary, but he gets a physical injury on his hip. Now, the unidentified man asks Yaakov to release him. They actually fight all night. And Yaakov demands a blessing in exchange. So who is this, and why does Yaakov want a blessing? So with this battle and Yaakov's victory, Esau's angel, that's who it was, Esau's angel, acknowledged that Yaakov had a right to the blessings that their father had given him. And the blessing that Yaakov receives will impact him and his descendants for all time. And the angel says, no longer will your name be called Yaakov, but Yisroel, for you have contended with God and man and have prevailed. Now, this is what the angel blessed as they wrestled for a night before Yaakov's meeting with Esau. And later we read that God himself appeared to Yaakov and reiterated the change of his name to Yisroel. And the narrative proceeds to state that Yaakov saw God face to face. What does this all mean? Now, Abraham too had his name changed from Abram, and that name was changed by God. But with Abraham, it says that the change was absolute. The Talmud says, whoever calls Abraham Avram violates a prohibition in the Torah. Not everybody knows that sometimes people name their children Avram, and they don't know they're supposed to name Avraham, because it says, no longer shall your name be called Avram. So this was a change all the way through. Now, Yaakov too was told, no longer shall your name be called Yaakov. Yet the Torah continues to call him by both names, sometimes alternating between Yaakov and Yisrael in a single narrative or even in a single verse. Now, we have to understand what that means. So why are you sometimes saying Yaakov? Why are you sometimes saying Yisrael? And the Jewish people who carry the name of their exclusive ancestor are also called both Yaakov and Yisrael. We're B'nai Yaakov and B'nai Yisrael. Now, Abraham's name change came when he was circumcised. He circumcised himself by God's command. And this marked his elevation from Avram, exalted father, to Avraham, exalted father of the multitudes. So to call Avraham Avram is to reduce him to his earlier self and significance. So he changed, and that change remains. On the other hand, Yaakov and Yisroel are two different names with two different meanings. Yaakov represents a higher state of being. Yisroel represents a higher state of being than Yaakov. And the Yisroel element, the Israel element in Yaakov is no longer Yaakov. In other words, it's interesting, the Yisrael element in Yaakov, that means that we have that element in ourselves. And when we are in that Yisroel element, it's not a Yaakov element. Yaakov is not there, it's a Yisroel element. But there are certain virtues to the Yaakov state that the Yisroel state does not have. So obviously there's good in this and good in this, and let's see where that goes. So Yaakov remains a name for both the third patriarch and for the Jewish people as a whole. Now, Yisroel might represent a higher stage in the Jews' development than Yaakov, but the greatness of the Jewish people lies in that there are both Yaakov Jews and Yisroel Jews. And there are Yaakov and Yisroel elements within each individual Jew. So we have both in us. We need to understand what this means. Now, the Torah gives us two interpretations of the name Yaakov. Yaakov was born grasping the heel of his elder twin Esav. So he was named Yaakov, which means in Hebrew, at the heel. Years later, when Yaakov disguised himself as Esav to receive the blessings that Yitzchak intended to give his elder brother, Esav proclaims, no wonder he's called Yaakov, and he's looking at that as cunning. Twice he has deceived me. He has taken my birthright, and now he has taken my blessings. So it's interesting that that fight, who should get these blessings, is the battle that Yaakov had with this Esav angel. And the Esav angel is saying, you win. You're victorious, and your name will be Yisroel. So let's see what that means. Now, the fighting name when you're struggling is the Yaakov. Yaakov is the Jew still in the thick of the battle of life. A battle in which he's often at the heel, which means dealing with the lowest aspects of his own personality and of his environment. And this is a battle. So he's battling on the inside with himself, and he's battling on the outside, depending on what's going on. So this is a battle that he has to wage with hidden strength. Since he is in enemy territory, he has to disguise his true intentions in order to outmaneuver those who attempt to ensnare him. Now, threatened by a hostile world and plagued by his own shortcomings and negative inclinations, the Jacob Jew has yet to transcend this axiomatic condition of his humanity. The fact that, as it says in the Torah, man is born to toil, and that human life is an obstacle course of challenges to our integrity. So this is a battle, not to give up, not to fall into it, but to fight the fight, which is called toiling, doing the work. Now, we need to know that despite all that Yaakov must face, he has been given the capacity to meet every challenge. Yaakov has been given the capacity to meet every challenge. That's very important. That means that we can't fall into sadness, anger, giving up, none of that. Victimhood, none of that. Because that's not who we are, and that's not what God wants from us. And we have to find out how to fight the fight. When it comes to something like victimhood or giving up, the Rebbe talks a lot about how important it is to study Shar HaBitachon, the gate of trust, that we need to know that everything comes from God, and that everything, whether it looks it or not, is really for the good, because God knows what he is doing. And then when we put our trust in God, we're not victims. Yeah, we have to take care of things. That's Yaakov's toil. He's doing the work to try to make it work out well. He doesn't just sit there and say, well, whatever, God's on top of it. No, Yaakov is the person doing the work, but he does not feel like a victim, never. So even if he momentarily succumbs to some internal or external challenge, he never loses his intrinsic goodness and purity, which ultimately asserts itself no matter how much it has been repressed by the difficulties of life. So Yaakov, each of us who are in the toil aspect, have this goodness and purity, and no matter what, we have that. But while he might be free of sin, he's never free of toil or of the struggle to retain his sinless state. For Yaakov, the war of life rages on, regardless of how many of its battles he has won. So Yaakov has to keep struggling and keep fighting to go further in life. And sometimes it seems like it could be something very simple, like it means he has to keep showing up. And what that means is different for different people, but he's got to do it. And sometimes it's as simple, which is not so simple for everybody, as getting up early. Some people always get up early naturally, and it's easy for them. And they get to work right away. And for other people, it's hard to get up. So it's saying, show up, get up. Okay, so the person got up. Guess what? Tomorrow's another morning. You have to show up again and get up again. And that goes for so many things in our lives. That's the Yaakov situation. Yisroel, which means divine master, on the other hand, is the name of Jacob when he has struggled with the divine and with men and has prevailed. Now, Yisroel is the Jew who has prevailed over his own humanity so completely. He's so completely internalizing the intrinsic perfection of his soul that he is now immune to all challenges and temptations. He has shown up so much that this is who he is now. He shows up. And he has overcome the divine decree that man is born to toil. So he doesn't have to keep fighting because he fought and he is victorious. Now, that could mean that for some people, they get up in the morning because they get up in the morning, because they fought this battle so many times that they don't have to do it. Or it could be like keeping Shabbos, that somebody says, Friday afternoon, my friends are going to the beach, and no, Friday afternoon is Friday afternoon. Now I'm getting myself ready to light candles, and they can go to the beach. They can do whatever they want. That's up to them. Or the sale is going to be over tonight. I am not dealing with that. I have Shabbos to keep. And when it's done enough times, we know that this is who I am and this is what I do. Yaakov is the name reserved for when we're referred to as God's servants, while Yisroel is God's name of choice when he speaks of us as his children. Now, the defining element of the servant's life is his servant to his master. So he shows up because he's a servant. You have to, if you're an assistant in a company, you have to check the emails before the boss comes in. So the servant has to be there and has to show up, and it could be a battle, but that's what he's got to do. He has to serve God. The child too serves his father, but the relationship is that his service is not toil, but pleasure. My father asked me to do this. Of course, my pleasure. I would love to do this. You want me to show up in the morning and go to synagogue? My pleasure. I would love to do this and meet you there. So what for the servant is work imposed on a resisting self and environment. It's for the child the harmonious realization of his identity as the extension of his father's essence. So when we realize we are an extension of our father's essence, whatever God wants, we want that too, of course. That's who I am. That's not only what I do, which is more like a servant, but it's who I am, and that's why I do it. Now, the first part of Jacob's life was consumed by his struggles with his brother Esav, a struggle which began in the womb, continued through their contest over the firstborn's right and their father's blessings, and culminating in Jacob's all-night battle with the angel of Esav and the brothers' face-to-face encounter the next day. In the middle of this time, Yaakov also spent 20 toil-filled years tending to the sheep of Lavan the deceiver, years during which heat consumed me by day and frost at night, and sleep was banished from my eyes. That's what he says, as told in the Torah. And he was forced to become Lavan's brother in deception. In other words, to get out, he couldn't be straight because Lavan would never have let him out. If he would have said, okay, it's time for me to leave now, so I'm going, Lavan would have said, oh, those are my kids. Wait a minute, that's your wives. No, but they're my kids. And the sheep, but I earned them from you. Yeah, you worked, but they're mine. Everything. One of the things it says that Lavan says is everything is his. See, that's the ego. It's mine. When all about me, that's what the ego is, all about me. So he had to get up at night and take his family and go. And when Lavan comes, he says, well, how could you do that? And he says, you never would have let me go. And the only reason that he really gets away with it is because God appears to Lavan and tells him in the dream, don't tell him anything good or bad. Basically, you keep your distance from him. I'm taking care of him. And that's something that Yaakov, through all the work that he did, some of which was, he had to, like it says, become his brother in deception. He had to figure out how to make it work. And he had to do whatever he had to do. So Yaakov's name change to Yisrael marked the point at which he graduated from a servant of God to God's child. From an existence defined by struggle and strife to a harmonious realization of his relationship with God. This is the Yisrael aspect, and we need to hold this. A harmonious realization of our relationship with God. We have to hold on to that we are God's children and that we have a relationship with God, a relationship that comes from Sinai, but a relationship that comes from before creation. We have to know who we are, and we have to know that we have this relationship. Otherwise, we keep struggling to figure out who we are. We have to know who we are. And this is, when we do, then that's the Yisrael aspect. So even though after he was named Yisrael, he got it, he still continued to be Yaakov as well. And the Torah continues to use his old name along with the new. The events of his life now include periods of tranquility, that's the Yisrael aspect, such as the 9 years from his return to the Holy Land from Haran until the sale of Yosef. Those were peaceful times. But then Yosef was sent to Egypt, but also when he had 17 years in Egypt with Yosef and his family, and that was peaceful for him. But there also were periods of strife, 22 years that he mourned his beloved Yosef, who he never thought he would see again. Now, the father of the people of Israel was the model for both states of the Jew. The tranquil child of God at peace with himself, God and society, whose harmonious life is a beacon of light and enlightenment to his surroundings. So when we come to that place of peace, where we know that we're at peace with ourselves, at peace with God, at peace with the world, then we are light, and we are meant to be a light to the nations. And also the struggling servant of God, grappling with his self and character, his relationship with God, and his place in the world. So this is a struggle because, again, like sometimes a person could feel like they're victims, but they have to come to this place of God is in charge. I can do my part. But whatever God decides, everything comes from the one God and everything is for the good, whether we understand it or not. And this is something that when we take this in, we become the Yisroel instead of the Yaakov, but sometimes it is a struggle. Now, the Yaakov state is not just a prerequisite state toward the attainment of the Yisroel state, but it's an end in itself, an indispensable role in the Creator's blueprint for life on earth. So God wants us to continue to do the work and struggle to show up with joy. That's the struggle, and God wants that. Yaakov's struggle is necessary so that no wrongdoing comes out. Otherwise, people slip into states that are not what God wants. Because on Yaakov's level, the veiling and concealment of godliness present a challenge which must be overcome. That's what is the problem. The veiling and concealment of godliness. Because if we could say, we understand this is for a reason, I understand the reason, and it's God is in charge, then what happens is that we have joy and peace. But sometimes we don't understand the reason. We don't always understand the reason for what happens. And if we have this fight in ourselves, because where is God? God is here. How could God do this? God did it for the good. I don't know why he did it, but he did it, and God is the one who did it, and God is the one who does it. And when we do that, we overcome the veiling and concealment of godliness because we know that God is here. And that's really essential, and that's the struggle. That's why Yaakov is given the title, my servant, for his divine service of refining the animal soul involves labor and toil. But there's no wrongdoing. In other words, he doesn't slip so much that he can come back, even if occasionally he is on the way to slipping, because Yaakov summons up inner strength and overcomes the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination that tries to pull him into what God does not want. And we see that it says, serve God with joy. It says it, serve God with joy. Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha. And the evil inclination, but how could I do that? And that's not what God wants. God wants us to struggle the struggle to say, I'm here to serve God with joy. Do I understand everything? Of course I don't understand everything. God is not small that we can say, okay, I got your picture. No, we don't. God is big, and we don't always understand what he's doing. But when we say, I trust you, I love you, I'm serving you with joy, I'm showing up for you with joy. And we see how that can be a struggle. But Yisroel, which is different than Yaakov, has no need to contend with the Yetzer Hara. Yisroel has already striven with angels and men and prevailed. And the verb uses the past tense in the Torah, indicating that the struggles are behind him. He has already nullified all the veils concealing godliness. Therefore, the divine service of Yisrael does not involve a struggle with forces opposed to holiness. Instead, his efforts are dedicated solely to reaching higher and higher within the domain of holiness, going from strength to strength. So the choices are different choices. For Yaakov, it could be like, okay, getting up in the morning, or it could be not eating that I know is not good for me, or it could be not acting like a victim and walking around with a sad face, or it could be many, many things, but that is the work of the Benoni who makes the decision, I am going to show up, getting up, eating properly, having a smile on my face. And we know there's two sides of the heart. So one can feel joy and the other one can feel sadness because two things are going on at the same time. But to live with the joy on our faces that is saying, I am here to serve God with joy. It's not exactly the way I would have liked it to be, but I know that God's on top of it and it's coming from God. And this is the struggle. That's the Benoni. But Yisrael is a tzaddik. Yisrael gets it. Even if he doesn't understand everything, he gets it, that everything is from God. And he shows up with joy, knowing that he is an extension of God. And they were all an extension of God. And so he's able to have a different kind of struggle. His struggle is how to get to higher levels of good. So it's not like he's struggling between good and evil. He's struggling between good and good. How can I do better today? So that's a different kind of work. There was Rav Sadia Gaon, who was a great sage and tzaddik. He was traveling in Europe and he needed a place to stay for Shabbos. So he went to the synagogue and somebody invited him, but he didn't say who he was. He didn't want to be somebody special. He was just like many people on the road traveling. So somebody invited him and gave him nice hospitality. And then in the morning, he gave him whatever he gave him, some money, or he gave him, certainly he gave him food to take along for the road. And that's it. Somebody came to him a little bit later and said, oh my gosh, you had Rav Sadia Gaon in your house. He slept in your house. And he said, what? I didn't know that was Rav Sadia Gaon. So he chased down the road and came up to him and he said, I'm so sorry. And Rav Sadia Gaon said, what are you sorry about? He said, if I would have known it was you, I would have served you so much better and served you nicer. He, instead of the sheets that he had, he would have tried to find the better sheets and give him the better sheets, and he would give him the better food, and he would have made everything so much better. And Rav Sadia Gaon looked at him and he said, I don't really know what you're talking about. You did great. Your hospitality was wonderful. Everything was comfortable. You were kind. You gave me food to take. Everything was wonderful. So please don't feel like you should have done more because you did great. Okay, so the man goes home feeling better. But then Rav Sadia Gaon was thinking. What was he thinking? He was thinking, what does this mean? And what he realized was, I served God the best I could today. But now I'm learning Torah and I know more who God is and I'm more connecting to God. I read another chapter in Shara B'Tachon, the Gates of Trust. Now I have a better understanding. If I would have realized who God is yesterday, the way I understand it today, I would have served God so much better. Now that is the struggle of the Yisrael. It's not a struggle. It's not a struggle against a Yetzer Hara because he conquered his Yetzer Hara. His choices are not between good and evil. His choices are between good and better, or between higher levels, that he's always trying to get to higher levels. So now, how do we work with our own struggles? Sometimes we, who are created in the image of God, experience our inner struggles. As humans, we experience competing higher and lower wills. What do I want? What does God want? And we struggle to take the high road. And it's a struggle. And sometimes we do take the high road, the higher road. It's called mitzvot behidur, to do mitzvahs in a beautiful way. Like the host of Rosh Hashanah, I would have given you the better sheets. I would have given you the food that we saved for Shabbos. We'll work out Shabbos when we get to it. But I would have given you the best of the best had I known it was you. And now he's always looking, Yisrael's looking to do better. So sometimes we have an inner struggle with our own identity. The sages describe this as part of the struggle with the angel of Esav. People sometimes have doubts about their role in life. Yaakov wondered if he was ready and able to assume his role as the spiritual heir of his father, Isaac. Can I do this? Am I up to do this? Am I on this level? Can I write the book? Can I give the lecture? Can I cook for so many people? Am I up to this? Can I really do this? I know God wants me to do this, but am I able to do it? And those self-doubts have to be overcome. That's the struggle. Rashi and the commentaries explain that the angel representing Esav would foreshadow the future exiles of the Jewish people. Throughout Jewish history, Esav has attacked, representing the nations that oppose the people of Israel. Esav has been destructive. So this now we're talking about the inner struggle. Now we're looking at the outer struggle, because Esav has been destructive through physical extermination, oppression, and war. So what happens when we're dealing with Esav on the outside? That he's fighting the fight against the Jewish people. A second way that Esav attacks, so there's the outside war and saying, as some people have said, they're just going to kill you all. That's what they want. So what do you do with that? That's one way. And a second way that Esav attacks, as shown in the Parsha where Esav reaches out his hand in friendship to Jacob, even though he doesn't feel true brotherliness. There's a point at which he hugs his brother, and there's little dots over that word that he kisses him and hugs him. And what do the dots in the Torah mean? So the sages are saying, a dot over every letter, what does that mean? And so it's explicated as he doesn't mean it. He's just being a faker and trying to make you think he's a good guy when he doesn't like you at all. The other explanation is, yeah, he doesn't like you at all. But in this moment, he's overcoming it for this moment and feeling the truth. This is my brother, my twin brother. But of course, when we get to the next word, it's not there anymore. So you can't trust him. So this another way that Esav attacks is that he's doing a tactic that tries to disseminate the Jewish people through assimilation and intermarriage. So both methods have left the Jewish people wounded and limping, much in the same way that Jacob was after encountering his opponent, Esav's angels. So we need to clarify our own understanding of the importance of Jewish continuity. And that we have to deal with that, help other people with that, recognize for ourselves that our children need to have Jewish education in order to go further in life. And we have to do the best that we can to keep things going. Now, the name Yisroel means one who has contended with God and man and has prevailed. And the name expresses his spiritual essence and potential. And the Zohar teaches that the struggle with the angel would come to express Jacob's and every Jew's ongoing struggle between self and God, between one's ego and spirit. It symbolizes the victorious struggle to sublimate our will to that of our Creator's will. That's a struggle. If this is what God wants, I need to work on this. I need to do something about it. I need to do it the way God wants me to do it. That's the struggle that Yaakov goes through, and Yisrael has come through this. But it says that this is what God wants, that God wants this struggle to continue, in the sense that we are transforming ourselves to higher and higher levels through the struggle, until Yisrael has to deal with much more refined work to go on higher levels. So we need to examine our beliefs to live and develop Jewishly. And the questions that we ask ourselves are for a purpose, and we need to work them through. We ask ourselves, why am I here? What is my purpose? How do I achieve it? And these questions are not supposed to be like the victim says, why am I here? That's not a question. That's a complaint. That's a kvetch. But we're supposed to say, why am I here? What is my purpose? Like, I want to do my purpose. Let me know. How do I achieve it? So the questions need to be questions that are asked positively in order to go forward to be who we're meant to be. Now, the sages tell us about the meaning of seeing God face to face. They say that God communicates to us directly through our daily challenges. Life's tests can help to refine our ability to actualize our inner potential. So that means a test is supposed to bring out something good in us. It could be the tiniest test. It could be that the car in front of you is just sitting there and you have someplace to go. How do you handle this test? You could say things you shouldn't say, or put your hand on honk until you think he's going to pass out, or you could do whatever you think you could do, but it's not going to help. The question is to recognize this too is from God. Okay, now what can I do? Maybe I could go around him, but the point is to do it in a way that is actualizing our inner potential. Now, the tough times we live as individuals or as a nation can ultimately come to reveal our inner greatness. They help to elevate us beyond what we thought we were capable of doing. So remember, before we were saying the Yaakov person is saying, I don't know if I could do this. This might be too hard. But the tests sometimes get us to say, I can do it. I didn't think I could do it, but I can do it. I can really do it. I'm going to do it. And the test brings out what we didn't think we could do. In happy times, we have a different test, to recognize the source of our abundance and blessings, and not to think that my successes are all about me, but to realize that God is, that's called the test of wealth. But always, when we're in the situation where we're the ones making the decisions and we're the ones getting things through, we need to know that God is helping me with this decision. God is giving me the ability to think, maybe I really can do it. God is giving me the ability to say, I could do this. I could use the money for good things. I can trust that God's taking care of me. It's all from God. So regardless of our many differences, so all these are struggles. These are the Yaakov struggles that we all face. The name Yisroel expresses our common heritage and identity. So whoever you are, regardless of your religious practice or background, at some point you may find yourself immersed in an existential struggle. So what role will we play in our collective destiny? Regardless of upbringing or quality of Jewish education, we all have to make the choice as to whether or not to develop ourselves into optimally functioning Jews. What does that mean? An optimally functioning Jew will continually strive to develop a deeper relationship with God. So we always have to bring God into the story of where we are at that moment. How is God in the story? It's from God. What can I do? Whatever God would like me to do. So this work to continually strive to develop a deeper relationship with God is something that's here for each of us to do. And that's the Yisroel. It's also the Yaakov. Each one shares that from a different vantage point. We're not meant to be the same, each of us. It's within our diversity that the greatest unity can be achieved. We each have different talents, and every Jew possesses the potential to make a unique contribution. Now, the name Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel, of Yisrael, continues to describe a nation of people with different characters and disparate beliefs. We're unique. Yet, no matter what kind of Jew you are, and whatever you think is going on, the name of Yisroel describes your essence. Each of us has this Yisroel in us. And this is the intangible inner sanctum where Jacob's struggle resounds. So this fight is to get into that inner holy place where it's all Yisroel. And it awakes each of us to activate the spark that ignites your inner yearning to prevail. That's the job, to activate the spark that will ignite your inner yearning to prevail. You may struggle with yourself, with your thoughts and what others expect you to believe. And you may not yet have experienced your own moment of truth, where you know God is the one, God is my God, I'm his child, and I'm here to serve God, and this is what I'm doing. And then it comes, that defining moment in which you encounter something or someone with whom you are compelled to wrestle. You might find yourself grappling with a moral dilemma, a test of character, commitment, or identity. The time has arrived. You will wrestle with your belief in God or its lack, and all the while you question if you have the strength within yourself to actualize your spiritual potential. And just when you suffer what appears to be a crippling blow, it seems so hard, you'll gather all the inner fortitude you've got. You will transcend yourself and your limitations to overcome this attacker. And then you will control him, could be your own Yetzer Hara, and you will overcome him and yourself. You will have transformed the struggles and the beliefs of your Jewish forebearers into your own through virtue of your own will. For you have wrestled with God and with man and have prevailed, that you use your will to show up, and then you know who you are. And like your forefather Jacob, you too are an integral link in an eternal chain of spiritual warriors. Their spiritual DNA has passed on to you. Never alone. You need to only activate your inner will, and you'll discover the collective strength of generations. The birthright that once appeared to you as a mere accident of birth has ultimately come to define you. So it's not, yeah, I'm a Jew. No, I'm a Jew. That's who I am. And to know who we really are. That moment, we become the Israel with consciousness, really. We all live with the Jacob struggles of our lives and the Yisroel peace and perspective. Jacob has the assurance that he will be victorious in the struggle. And this should give us strength and happiness. This strength and happiness will in turn hasten the victory. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe said, a soldier proceeds with a happy melody. Although he goes to a place of danger, it is his approach in happiness which enables him to be victorious. So we have to choose joy, and that is what makes us victorious. So I just want to add one more little thing. On Saturday night, we sing a song at the Malava Malka meal. We have a meal in which we escort out the Sabbath. And it says, Al tira avdi Yaakov. Do not fear Yaakov, my servant. As explained in Likutei Torah, on Shabbos, the Jewish people are on the level of Yisrael. We need to know that all the time. Shabbos, we're always on that level. There is no need for strenuous efforts to refine the world's material substance. As the Shabbos departs, however, Jews make the transition to the level of Yaakov, my servant, because during the week we do the service and prepare to resume their mission of refining material entities in the weekdays which followed. Therefore, we are sure, do not fear Yaakov, my servant. A Jew is promised that there is no need to fear this transition from Yaakov to Yisrael. On the contrary, he's empowered to proceed in his divine service with happiness and satisfaction, that we need to go forward with joy. And this in turn will hasten the completion of the task and the coming of the era in which all is Shabbos. We were going toward a time when it's called Yom Shekulo Shabbat, that it's all going to be Shabbos and rest for everlasting, that we're going to live with the Yisroel way of living, that it's all going to be Shabbos. And may we experience this with blessing and with joy and all good for us and for the world, because our light will truly shine. God's light will shine.